Please welcome Lauren Booth.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum. There is not a chance that I could have seen this life for myself. But I'll tell you what, had I seen how happy I am a year ago, I would have been very pleased and very grateful for the path that I've been led to take. Alhamdulillah. For my luck. Some of you will know me as the sister-in-law of a once powerful oppressor of human beings. Sorry, the Middle East envoy Tony Blair, as he likes to be known. And hopefully others of you will also be aware that my real job title is presenter and broadcaster. But I'd like to tonight, if I may, share with you my journey to Islam, because being a Muslim, I now understand how spiritually uplifting it is to see someone take their shahada like that. I was crying. Alhamdulillah to you, brother, wherever you are, and may this community show you the same love that has been poured like a deluge upon me in the last 6 months. I pray for you that you feel that same love. So I'd like to take you on how this journey happens. To someone who outwardly seemed like the very epitome, and was, of a Western journalist, with a lifestyle completely at odds with the values and the processes and the choices inherent in being a worshipper and a servant of Allah. Because this is a very interesting concept. I'll come to it maybe if I remember later, but this idea of willing servitude. When you come from the media, where you are God, and then you put your head to the floor, and you actually pray to God, and you submit yourself. That in itself is a journey, but I'm going too fast. Let me take you back, if I may. When I was a child, I grew up in your average North London household in the 70s, which is to say that both my parents were drunk a lot of the time. My father was a lapsed Catholic. That means that he drank a lot of Guinness and got a lot of women pregnant. He also used to sing hymns when he'd had a drink. It sounds a lot gloomier than it was, and this isn't a knocking Catholicism, but there is a lifestyle that means that secularism has overtaken the popularity of belief in our communities in Britain. My mother was what you might be able to call perhaps a superstitious Christian. So she would never go to church, and she'd never talk about religion, but she would hang crosses around her bed to ward off evil spirits. So those symbols were there in life. But funnily enough, growing up, I used to pray. I loved it. I remember that feeling of being 7 years old and going to my bed and putting my hands together and going, please, God, let Mummy and Daddy be nicer to me tomorrow. Please, God, let my sister stop being really annoying. Because kids know how to ask for everything, because they automatically believe that someone up there is bigger than their parents and will really help them when they need it. Isn't that interesting? What I've noticed recently, I'm going to jump forward a bit. I've got jet lag, so if I jump forward and none of it makes sense, will you bear with me, please? Yes, I've already lost that point. Wake up, brain. Okay, we'll go back to the beginning. So when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, you sort of stop praying because you get into the cult of the self. My dad was a socialist. He was a good man like that. Politically, he said to me, he gave me good values in many ways. He said, you know what? You're white, You're in London, you're not bad looking. You've got a fair intellect. You've won the lottery of life. Now, what are you going to do for the rest of the world? This is how we were brought up when I was a child. And the other thing he used to say, I remember crying once because we couldn't afford toilet paper. So we used to have to use newspaper in the bathroom. And I remember going in to him at 10 years old and saying, "Dad, I've just realized we're poor." And he looked at me and said, because he was from Liverpool, a really poor family, he said, "Poor? We're not poor, we're broke." And what are you using in the bathroom? Are you using the Sun newspaper? No, you're using the Guardian. This is not poverty, this is aspiration. I thought that was brilliant. I've never looked at the Guardian the same since. And quite frankly, some of the things that's written about Islam now, I'm thinking of going back and using it for the same thing. So we had some values, but none of them were linked to religion. And as I became in my 20s, I became what I thought was a goddess. I was at drama school, I was acting, I was attractive to men, I was drinking. God became a sideline, a little important voice that had once been there for me, and I didn't need him anymore. As Nietzsche said, God is dead and we killed him. And that cold gathering, that cold, stony exterior started to form on my heart. And I knew I didn't like it, but I was happy in my life, and I was lucky, and I was making my own luck. It was me. I was the mistress of the universe. How clever of me to get work. How clever of me to get luck. But you know, within all of that, I always did feel lucky, and I always did feel grateful. And when I did remember to show some gratitude, I would pray. So what did I know about Islam then in this growing up? There were only 3 Muslim girls at my school when I was growing up. And what I knew about Islam was this: Muslim girls were really killer at science. They were way better than me at maths, and they didn't date boys as teenagers. That was it. Now, considering the drama in the newspapers post 9/11 about this community waiting with knives to slit our throats and guns to attack us and planes to crash on us, how come it was so quiet before 9/11? Was everybody just waiting for that signal? Or was there no signal? Was there no 9/11? We won't get into that. So what did I know about Islam in 2004? Well, I was having a bit of an awakening, because the thing about 9/11 is it wasn't just a clarion call for the people who wanted to find a new enemy, for people whose lives had become so materialistic that they enjoyed war. If we're not having a Cold War, if we're not having a Second World War, what war can we have to justify our emptiness inside? It wasn't just awakening for them, you know. Many of the imams amongst you will know that after 9/11, the sale of Qurans in the United States and the United Kingdom shot up. People with wondering minds, people with curious minds thought, what is Islam? Who are these people who have been silently waiting to kill us? I was one of those people. I wanted to find out more. And at the same time, just slightly before that, I remember seeing some news footage from Palestine. There are some images that are iconic and so deeply moving that they do something to your soul. One of these images you'll remember, and I'll put it into your mind now, and you won't be grateful that I've done it, but I have to. A girl running with napalm on her back, screaming. Remember that from Vietnam? That awful image, you can see it. Well, I'll give you another image now, one that has stayed with me for 11 years and will never go. A young boy with a stone in his hand, doing this as a tank bears down on him. I can tell you that boy's name. That boy is Faris Ode. He was a early teenager from Rafah in Gaza. And soon after that picture was taken, he was shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. Another mother mourning another child in a place I'd hardly heard of. But something about that image and the way it was portrayed in the media woke me. Or was it that image? Was it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You make your decisions when you've heard my story, please. Something awoke in me. Why? The voiceover from the BBC appeared to say, look at that lovely Israeli tank bearing down on that wicked Arab Muslim urchin. This was after Tiananmen Square. I knew that tanks were bad, unarmed civilians and children good. This is how life works. Big army against big army bad, going against civilians bad, civilians fighting for freedom good. But no, not in the case of this place I barely knew, Gaza, and these people, Palestinians, who I'd never heard of very much. So in 2005, I managed to get myself a commission from my newspaper to go and interview Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. I went on my own, not knowing what to expect. But I did have some preconceptions that I took with me, which is funny as a socialist, because I didn't know I had them until I was on the plane to Tel Aviv. And on the plane to Tel Aviv, I realized I was scared of Arabs. Pretty scared of Arabs. Arabs with guns were really going to be frightening. And Arab Muslims with guns in the West Bank, where everybody was terrorists, what was I doing? I wanted to go home. I kind of hoped the Israelis would just deport me. I heard they do that. But nobody did. It wasn't what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had planned. So I took a taxi to Ramallah. And I realized on that taxi ride that I had what we can call a mild form, at least, of Islamophobia. I thought everyone was terrorists. I didn't know anything about women in hijabs. I didn't know anything about Islam. And here I was going to terrorist enclave, Palestine, the Palestinian territories run by terrorists in the enclave of terrorism. So imagine how I felt the next day, going up in a big metal lift with huge Palestinian guards around me with their guns and their walkie-talkies. And I'll never forget that scene. It replays sometimes in my mind. There's me standing there, huge Fatah gunmen, as they're called on CNN. They're guards for the president. Everybody has them. Get over it. And I'm standing there, and one of them says this, Bukra, bukra, yalla, 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 inshallah. Habibi, yalla, habibi. And I think to myself, subtitle, we'll behead the white woman later. This is what I heard. This is what I was hearing every time they spoke. I thought, I've seen this movie and it doesn't end well for the white woman. It's not good. What am I doing here? It took me a little while, maybe about 5 days in the West Bank, for all of that to be gone. I was walking down a road the next day in Ramallah without a coat. The Israelis had kept my luggage, as they do when they find out you're going to the West Bank. It's very common. So I only had a kind of shirt on, and I was walking around going, wow, look at this place. And an old lady said, yalla, 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 yalla. And she took me into her house and put her arm around mine. And she said, showed me a wardrobe full of clothes. Looked at them and took out a coat, put it on my back, got out a little suitcase, got out some jumpers. She said, Habibti, yalla. And wrote down her address. I said, what is this? I've never encountered such instant generosity to a stranger. And that wasn't all. Everywhere I walked, hello, how are you? Salam alaikum. The full-back position I was beginning to realize for the Palestinian people, Muslims and Christians. I will never forget that there are Christians in the West Bank and Gaza, enormous, any of us here.